Okay, so we're live, and we're going to start a new Maimah this week. We have 3 weeks before Pesach, and also 3 weeks before Yud Aleph Nissen. So it's a Yud Aleph Nissen Maimah that talks all about Pesach. I didn't have a chance to learn this Maimah. It's been a few years since I learned it, so I looked at it a little bit, at least until Bays. I learned a little bit, but we'll learn it together. Yeah, that's Hashem. It's good. Okay, until Bays we should be okay. After Bays we'll see what happens. Okay, so what I do know is that this mimer goes through, if it explains, but even the parts that it doesn't explain, it goes through fundamental ideas in what mitzvahs are all about. Okay, let's design in mitzvahs, the details of mitzvahs, kavanas of mitzvahs, v'chulu. And then in the end, Rebbe talks about a geula for every single one of us. So I hope we'll get to that part before Pesach, because the geula is the thing of Yitzias Mitzrayim. But no, I'll tell you before we even get started, at the end of the Maimon says, no matter in what situation you are, Skumt Pesach, Hotman Agula, they just schleps you out like there's no tomorrow. Okay, yeah. And we're finishing the whole Aveda of the first half of the year. The first half of the year, the Aveda is Milamata Lamaila. You start with Rosh Hashanah, it's the Seres Yimei Tshuva, is the Aveda of Tshuva is from Yira, it's from Kabbalah Soil, it's all Milamata Lamaila. And then the second half of the year is an Aveda Milamaila Lamata. So we're in the last few days, Chafei Adar is the Yom Sugel, it's the birthday of the Rebbetzin, the day that the Rebbe taught us to be happy that the Eibishter gave us a shlichus. Right? You know why we celebrate a birthday? What the Rebbe said. I know what other people say these days. It's a shtickle asiluf of what the Rebbe said, but maybe they have better sources. But on a birthday, we don't celebrate the fact that the world is incomplete without me. At least I didn't see it in the Rebbe's places. So it could be that there is a source for it. But from what I saw, we celebrate the big schus that the Eibishter. We'll get to that in a minute. First of all, let's talk about the birthday part. What the Rebbe says is the great zchus that I have, that the Eibishter gave me a shlichus. You have Melech Malchim Lachem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. L'gabe Melech Malchim Lachem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm a ish pashut, not even a ish pashut, or nothing. And the Eibishter was me mezakeh and gave me a shlichus to do on this world, and that's what we celebrate. And that's Chafei Adar, so that's a word for Chafei Adar. So we should remember that we each have a shlichus in this world. It's connected to the Tanya of the past couple of days. And it should give us a tremendous simcha in Avodas Hashem. So we're finishing the last few days of the Avodah Milamata L'Mayla, and now we're getting started with Pesach. Pesach is the Avodah Milamayla L'Mata, and the whole second half of the year is the Avodah Milamayla L'Mata. So let's go. It says in the pasuk, Yishalcha v'incha macher, when your child will ask you tomorrow. The pashtus macher means yesh macher l'achar zman, for coming generations. Lema, this is his question. What are the edus, the chukim, and the mishpatim? So these are three different descriptions for mitzvahs. Obviously, each description of a mitzvah refers to a different category, a different type of a mitzvah, and a different dimension in mitzvahs. I'm not going to try to translate it in English. I see people translate it edus, chukim, and mishpatim as decrees, laws, and proclamations. It's meaningless, really, because the words don't hold any content in English. Not the translations that I'm aware of. Okay, so we'll just use the words in Lashon Kodesh. Edus, chukim, and mishpatim, three different descriptions of mitzvahs. Asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu eschem, which the Eibishter commanded you. And Sheila Zui, Sheila Saben Chacham, this question that your child is going to ask you, this is the question of the wise child. Like it says in the Haggadah, Chacham Mahu Omer, what does the wise child, what does the wise son ask? Ma Edus. And the Haggadah quotes this pasuk. So this pasuk is a question that a wise son asks. Asking their mamar, since this child is called a wise child, and who do we call wise? You could have answered, maybe he's wise in other chachmas, but the Torah he doesn't know. So he says, no, we wouldn't call him wise. If he doesn't know Torah, we wouldn't call him wise, because true wisdom is only Torah. So certainly, since he learns Torah, he certainly knows the mitzvahs. So what's his question? He's asking the basics. He knows already the basics. What's he asking? If we look at the continuation of the pasuk, the answer that we give to this question of the wise son, that the Eibishter commanded us to do all of these mitzvahs, so that it should be good for us. In other words, by doing the mitzvahs, we receive goodness. To answer the child, what do we tell him? That there's a benefit to performing mitzvahs. And what's that benefit? L'tov lanu will be good for us. Move on. Shapir Shema Eidos. So what's the question of the Ben Chacham? Is Mahu Inin HaMitzvahs Ezu Ma'ale Yesh Behem? The Ben Chacham asks, not what are the mitzvahs practically. He knows already Shabbos and Tzitzis and Tefillah. He knows already. But he's asking why. What's so good about performing mitzvahs? And that's his question. How is it possible that a wise child should ask such a question? What's the Maila in mitzvahs? What's he's maybe he's a teenager. On the Hemshech Hamayim, it sounds right that he's a teenager. But the Vasachis, we accept that he's not a teenager. So what kind of questions? What's the Maila in mitzvahs? I mean, it's like saying, what's the Maila in gold? Say that. You're not a Ben Chacham, understand? What's the Maila in being wealthy? What's the Maila in eating? These are not questions of a Ben Chacham. These are questions that need to be answered and explained. But if somebody doesn't understand these concepts yet, we don't call him a Ben Chacham. So what's the Ben Chacham? What's the Maila in mitzvahs? Move on, and there it says a further. The question is even greater. In the answer that we give to the Ben Chacham, there are actually two distinct concepts. And now the Rebbe is going to quote the pasuk in greater detail. We answer him, "Vayitzeinu havayim mitzrayim." The Eibishter took us out of Mitzrayim. Vayitzavenu lasis es kol hachukim, and He commanded us to do all of the chukim. So that's part one of the answer. That the Eibishter took us out of Mitzrayim and He commanded us to do the chukim. The kivan sheitzianu mitzrayim. What's the pshat in this answer? Since the Eibishter took us out of Mitzrayim, we were enslaved in Mitzrayim without a chance to leave Mitzrayim, and we would have been there for forever, enslaved people. Since the Eibishter took us out of Mitzrayim, now on a Meshubadim Elav L'Kayim Mitzvaysav, we're subjected to the Eibishter, and we have to fulfill His mitzvahs because He's the one who gave us our freedom. He's the one who made us what we are, and because of that, whatever He tells us to do, we have to do. So if He tells us to do mitzvahs, we have to do mitzvahs. That's the first part of the answer to the Ben Chacham, and then comes the second part, which we already mentioned before. And there's a second part of performing the mitzvahs, that the mitzvahs actually have a mila. There's something special about the mitzvahs, that they bring us benefit for our entire lives. So there's two answers. And we'll see in a moment what really conceptually the difference between these two answers is. From this, then in the answer, we explained 2 points. That the Ben Chacham had no idea about neither of these concepts. And this is very difficult to understand. Since he doesn't know what's the idea, what's the concept of mitzvahs. It's not only that he's lacking in understanding in what's so special about the mitzvahs. He doesn't even understand why you have to do mitzvahs in Eivin of Kabbalah, which is the lowest level of performing mitzvahs. Right? In other words, if you have, we'll take a mashal from a king and his nation. So you have the simple people, the farmers, the uneducated people, and they do what the king says. And then you have the people in the city who live next to the palace, and they also do what the king says, but they do it for different reasons. The people out on the farm who are uneducated, they do the mitzvahs. Why? Because the king said you don't have a choice, you have to do the mitzvahs. So this is the lowest level, right? Mashenkin, the people who understand the greatness of the king and what the idea of a king is, and they do the mitzvahs of the king's decrees because they understand the goodness that comes out of following the decrees of this king, because the idea of a king is somebody who's very high, and with his great wisdom, he leads the nation, and he sets up laws and governs the country with those laws so that everything should be peaceful and prosperous and just and moral. So the people in the city understand all of those milas, and that's the highest way of doing the mitzvahs. The people out on the farm, what do they do? The king said, you don't have a choice, you have to do it. Nobody's asking you. Kabbalah soil. And that's the lowest way to perform the commandment of the king. So the same thing over here in mitzvahs. There's two ideas in mitzvahs. There's the idea of l'toiv lanu, that there's a mila mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are very special. What do you think? Stavish does mitzvahs. There's certainly tremendous and very high things in mitzvahs. And that's the highest way of understanding mitzvahs. But the Ben Chacham is also needs an explanation why you have to do mitzvahs for Kabbalah soil. Even the lowest way of performing a mitzvah, you have to tell him, the Eibishter took us out of Mitzrayim, now you have to do this mitzvah. He didn't know that before. He didn't know even the lowest level of performing mitzvahs. if that's the case, if he doesn't even know the basics, if he doesn't even understand why you have to do mitzvahs on the most basic fundamental level, why do we give him the title of the wise son? Yes, we also have to understand that the Ben Chacham asks, what are the Eidos Chukim HaMishpatim that the Eibishter commanded you, Eschem v'lo yisanu, you and not us. Right? We're not going to get into the technicality. Just very briefly. The Ben Rasha, when the Ben Rasha says Eschem, what do we tell him? Afata hake yeshino. Since Heitzi Eshatzme min haklal, he said Eschem, you, not me. So knock out his teeth. Hake yeshino. But over here, by the Ben Chacham, he's not Meitzi Satzma min haklal. Why is he not Meitzi Satzma min haklal? Because what does he say? Asher tziva Hashem elekeinu eschem. Our God commanded you. So in other words, so he's including himself in Klal Yisrael. So he's not Meitzi Satzma min haklal. V'agam dal de Shem elekeinu ein makim lites shemeitzi Satzma min haklal. Yep. We won't think that Chas v'Shalom he's taking himself, he's removing himself and separating himself from Klal Yisrael. But still, Masha Eimer Eschem. Why does he say Eschem? He couldn't say Oisanu. Or if you're not sure how to express himself, keep quiet. What's Master Lange Drasha? You're just getting yourself tangled up. So what's going on? Why does he say Eschem? These are the questions. Okay, so let's see if we can make a summary. We have the first question is, if he doesn't know what are mitzvahs, then why do we call him a Ben Chacham? So we say, no, wait a second. He knows what are mitzvahs, but he doesn't understand what's special about mitzvahs. Why mitzvahs? That's why we tell him l'toiv lanu. But then David says, l'chure, he still shouldn't earn the title of a Ben Chacham. And even more so, he shouldn't earn the title of Ben Chacham that he doesn't even understand mitzvahs on the lowest level, on the level of Kabbalah Soil. Okay? Then the final question is, why does he say Eschem? He should have said Tziva Hashem Elokeinu Eisanu, or at least Hashem Elokeinu. The Rabbeim explain in the Ma'amarim, the Kiyum HaMitzvahs of the Avos was primarily a spiritual Aveda. Okay, so what's the story of the development of Torah and mitzvahs? It started with the Avos. The Avos learned the entire Torah, and they started doing mitzvahs. They learned Torah and they did mitzvahs. And that was a preparation for the mitzvahs that we were going to do later for the Gili of Matan Torah. However, there was a difference between the mitzvahs of the Avos and the mitzvahs that we do. The mitzvahs of the Avos were primarily spiritual matters. They were primarily ruchnis. They didn't have a connection to this physical world. This that they did, a physical act when they performed mitzvahs, right? Like it says famous when you get to Yaakov Avinu, he performed the kiyum of mitzvahs tefillin with maklis, with sticks. Exactly how, what, base minished, maybe vase, but I don't know. About Kopanim, the physical act was just keli for the spiritual aspect of the mitzvah. In other words, in order to have the spiritual, honestly, I'm not quite sure why you need it. If it's a spiritual idea, why do you need a physical keli? It could be so to connect the ruchnistic idea to the gashmistic evelt. But the main idea.
In general, why you need?
I'm saying if it's a ruchnistic zach, then why do you need a keli for the ruchnis? But this is Farmatan Torah, and they couldn't make a deal with Tachtein.
Right.
So why did they need it? So you're saying because if it's just a ruchnistic zach, then it stays in Elam Haba. Mamish like it has nothing to do with Elam Haza. Okay, say that in some form.
All the people. I mean, so it was very much connected with this world. I mean, Avram Avinu. I mean, it says it was only spiritual.
Avram Avinu
was bringing everybody closer. Wherever you knew Avram, and he became aware that there's God and the true God, and so why is this not connected to the world?
It's a very good question. And the answer is that we have to understand what the concept is. In other words, the concept is that Avraham Avinu was telling the people, serve Hashem. Yeah? Where's Hashem? Hashem is up in the heavens. Hashem is not, even if Avraham Avinu told them that Hashem exists in the world, which certainly Avraham Avinu did tell them about the oneness of the Eibishter in the world, But this was all an idea that was running contrary to the physical world. In other words,
everybody had already their own God.
no, no, not because of that. Because the very fact that the world is a physical world, where you can't see Hashem in the world, okay? So the world is separate from this idea that Hashem is one. Even if Avraham Avinu, which he did have tens of thousands, or maybe even more, la'alafim u'levavis, the Rambam says. So certainly tens of thousands of people following him. And like Avraham Avinu says, the idea of a one Eibishter spread throughout the entire world, but still, this idea was an idea that was separate from this world. This world screamed and said and insisted that there is no Eibishter. You look at the world, you don't see an Eibishter in the world. And al apam val chamasam, despite the world and in spite of the world, everybody was saying there is an Eibishter, but it wasn't connected to this world. So that's what we mean that it's a spiritual matter. It wasn't something that became part of the physical world. But this is it's actually a very subtle idea.
The experience when they saw Avraham Avinu go into the.
So what was the experience? So what was the experience?
That was very.
So what was the experience? The experience was that there's a world, and the world fights against Hashem. But Hashem's power is so strong that when He wants, He could break the world. Not that the world itself is holy. So the way they would interpret it is to say that this world rejects the Eibishter. Navas, because of the Eibishter's great might, He's able to, when He wants to, from time to time, come in and break the world, and therefore He broke the heat of the fire that it shouldn't burn Avraham Avinu. But that's still not saying that the world itself is a place of holiness. Okay, it's a very long topic that's discussed in many deep sichos and ma'amarim. So, in short, I did my best with what I was able to explain of it. Okay, so primarily it was an avodah ruchnis, a spiritual avodah. Va'pulish also begashmis, and the acts that the Avis did in the physical world has ain't kli la'avodah ruchnis. It was like a keli for the spiritual avodah. Maybe if I looked in the ma'amarim of the Rebbeim, they would explain it a little more. However, the mitzvahs that were given after the Avis at the time of Matan Torah, what's the main part of the mitzvah is to actually do the mitzvah begashmis. Doing the mitzvah begashmis is not a preparation, and it's not merely a vessel, a receptacle for the intention of the mitzvah, for the spirituality of the mitzvah. But the opposite, the main part of the mitzvah is the actual performance of the physical deed. That is the main part of the mitzvah. For example, a simple example to illustrate the point, mitzvah achilas matzah, when it comes to the mitzvah of eating matzah, if somebody sits on the night of the Seder and he has all of the kavanas in the secrets and hidden aspects of what the idea of matzah is, he won't eat it. He won't draw down any of the spirituality and any of the godliness into the world. On the other hand, if somebody sits down and eats the matzah, gambli kavana, even he forgot b'chlal that it's the night of Pesach. He was hungry, he took a matzah. He had no kavana. He does draw down the light of the Eibishter through doing the mitzvah. So we see that what's the main thing of a mitzvah after Matan Torah? What causes drawing the Ein Sof into this world? The physical action. And the physical action. And the Rabbeim explain, how can we draw down the infinite light of the Eibishter through a physical action? A physical action is so much lower and is so cannot be compared to the infinite light of the Eibishter, to the Ein Sof. So how, by me doing something, can I be mamshich the Ein Sof?
This is the whole purpose of it, its creation.
But is there a ben chacham or nicht gelernt chassidus? Let's see. We will see. And this is the answer that and this is why the Ben Chacham asks, this is what he means when he says eschem. In other words, eschem and not the others. Your Aveda, the Aveda of Yidden now after the time of Matan Torah, What does it mean to do a mitzvah? To do a physical deed. And this is not like the Aveda of the Avis, where mitzvahs were a spiritual affair. How can we draw down the infinite light of the Eibishter through such a lowly physical deed? Just to give a drop of a muscle, it's like saying if somebody's trying to understand quantum mechanics, quantum electrodynamics, he's trying to understand the deepest philosophical ideas and concepts that a human mind is able to understand, right? To comprehend. So you tell him, you know what? If you will go and fill up a cup of water and then pour half of it to the right and half of it to the left, so this will help you understand the idea. Well, what did you just say? Well, what's the connection? Over here, we're talking about very deep intellectual ideas. And you're saying by doing something physically, this is going to draw down intellectual understanding. Well, how could one affect the other? So how could doing a physical deed bring down the Ein Sof, the infinite light of the Eibishter? No, so what's the answer? And the answer that we tell him is, you should know the history. In the beginning, at first, we were slaves to Pari in Mitzrayim. And then there was Yitzias Mitzrayim. They took us out of Mitzrayim. And then afterwards, and then at Matan Torah, at Har Sinai, they used to command us to do these chukim. What's the answer? The Golus Mitzrayim, the Yitzias Mitzrayim, the Avodim Hayinu, and the Yitzienu, Matan Torah. These were all preparations for the seminal event of Matan Torah. Over Matan Torah, and at the time of Vayitzavenu, at the time of Matan Torah, Nitan HaKeach, along with telling us to do the mitzvahs, the Eibishter also gave us the power and the ability, Shalidei mitzvahs smaisius, that through physical mitzvahs, Lasers is kol hachukim, the Eibishter told us Dafka to do it and gave us the power to do it. Lasers taike yamshichu hamshachis l'mayla yeser mehamshachis shemshichu ha'aves alidei aveda ruchni shalem ve'ad lahamshachas ha'atzmus. That we will be able to draw down much higher levels of the Ein Sof of the Eibishter than the Avis were ever able to accomplish through their spiritual Aveda. And not only that, we could even draw down into this world the Atzmus of the Eibishter. And this is all why? Because there was preparation of the Golus Mitzrayim and Yitzias Mitzrayim, and then the Eibishter gave us the power by Yitzavena, by Matan Torah, to draw down Atzmus and all of the highest Giluyim through mitzvahs. So in other words, what we're telling him is that by Matan Torah wasn't only that the Eibishter told us, do this, don't do that. The telling of the Eibishter to us to do it was also giving us the power that when we do it, we will bring down the highest levels of Ein Sof until the Atzmus. And that's the answer to the Ben Chacham. Okay? In short, in summary, he's asking, what's the idea of putting on physical tefillin, physical leather, and physical tzitzis, etc.? How are you going to be able to draw down the Ein Sof and Atzmus? And the answer to him is that by Matan Torah, they used to give us the power that by doing these physical deeds, we draw down the Ein Sof and we draw down the Atzmus on a much higher level than others. Okay, sure. Now, we're moving on into the part of the Maimon that I didn't see for a few years, so we will learn it together. The Tzarech Lahav in Daf Verstehen, the Rebbe asks, according to this beer of the Rabbeim, what's the question of the Ben Chacham is that he doesn't understand the mitzvahs after Matan Torah. How do they work? So who beer rakal zeh shel achli shem asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu meisif eschem b'chtei lahadgish sheila sehi lo yal mitzvahs ta'avis ki im al mitzvahs asher tziva Elokeinu eschem la'achri Matan Torah. This part, this answer in the other Mamorim only explains why he says eschem. Eschem means to say you Yidden after Matan Torah, as opposed to what? As opposed to the Avis before Matan Torah. That explains that very, very well. First of all, he could still say us and not the Avis. Why does he have to say you are not the Avis? You are not the Avis also sounds like he's excluding himself. There's three parties over here. There's the person asking the question, there's the people that he's asking the question to, and then there are the others. If he says eschem you, two parties are being excluded. You, not me, and not the others. L'chora, if his intention was to only ask to contrast between the Aved of mitzvahs of the others and Yidden today, he should have said Esanu. So that he includes himself. He's also after Matan Torah. He includes the people to whom he's asking the question. He's only excluding the others who were before Matan Torah. Okay, that's the Ashton's.
Himself,
No, himself being the one who's asking the question, the Ben Chacham.
Okay.
Yeah, the Ben Chacham.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
We also have to understand why is he saying, describing the mitzvahs in three different categories of Eidos Chukim u'Mishpatim. Since his question is on the general idea of mitzvahs, so why is he going into the details of the mitzvahs? He's saying, I don't get the whole thing. It's like somebody saying, I don't understand the language. Yeah. So instead of saying, I don't understand Chinese, he says, I don't understand this word, and this word. Really? That's what you don't understand this word and this one and this word. You don't understand the whole thing. So say, I don't understand the whole thing. What's he asking? These types of mitzvahs, and those types of mitzvahs. According to the beer of the Rabbeim and the Derushim, he doesn't understand how could mitzvahs in general draw down Atzmas and Sof. That's true to all of the mitzvahs. He doesn't get it. So it's a general idea. Why are you referring to details as if they matter? This question is even stronger because the difference between Eidos Chukim and Mishpatim is in the intention that you have when you perform the mitzvahs. Because the mitzvahs of Chukim, one is obligated to perform them because the Eibishter commanded us to do it. And the mitzvahs of Eidos HaMishpatim, you have to perform them also because of a reason. And that's why they're called with the name Eidos HaMishpatim. So over here, the Rebbe is helping us understand a little bit how you push a taich, Eidos Chukim HaMishpatim. Yeah, in many Mamarim of the Frierdiker Rebbe quotes a pasuk, and then he starts asking questions on the pasuk. But he explains his question by pointing out that there's 3 or 4 different words in Lashon HaKodesh dedicated to describing this idea or another idea. And then he explains the difference between the 3 or 4 words when you're supposed to use this word, when you're supposed to use this word or the other word. And then he asks his question in the Maimer. Now that we properly understood the word, I don't know the difference. But we see from the Ha'ara that Eidos HaMishpatim, Eidos L'chora is the idea of testimony, is the idea of a sign, of bearing witness. And a mishpat is also an Indian of understanding, because usually when do you use the word mishpat? When you have a court case and you go between 2 sides, and the Dayanim say this side is right. There was the Rebbe says a story. Oh gosh, I can't remember. No, I was mixing up 2 stories. There's a story, I think, in L'Shem Ha'ezen. What's the book? Is that the book by Fala Khan?
Yeah.
Shem Ha'ezen's Fala Khan? So what was it, Fala Khan's book? Whatever it is. Shmutz V'Sipurim. Shmutz V'Sipurim brings over there a story about 2 women who were partners, business partners. And they came to the Rav for a din Torah. Some monetary dispute. Yeah. And so the Rav listened, and he passed it according to one of them. He said, the money belongs to you. So the other one starts cursing out the Rav the worst possible way. And the Rav is sitting there, and the Rav's wife, in the olden days, you came to the Rav's house. Yeah, that's the way it was. So the Rav's wife, comes in from the kitchen, and starts defending her husband and telling the woman, please stop. So the husband tells the Rav tells his wife, don't worry about it. In truth, she's not really upset at me. So hearing this, the woman started cursing even worse. So after she comes down, the Rav asks her, let me ask you a question. Do you want your son to be like me? He says, of course I want my son to be like you. So the Rav turns to his wife and says, I told you she doesn't really mean it. So there was a poll recently, apparently in Eretz Yisrael, that 50% of people who came before a rabbinical court were unhappy with their experience. 50. Well, so I said to myself, this is a perfect statistic. It can't get bad. I think it was 50.2%. The losing side. No, the losing side, 50%. 50% nicht zufrieden. The one who lost wasn't happy. The one who won was happy. So it's a perfect statistic. 50% was happy. The losing side was not happy. What's the big... the idea of the statistic was to say that, we have to reform, the Rabbanut and, this, that. People have such bad... 50% have bad experiences in the Rabbanut. Like, well, what are you talking... This is perfect. So, but the idea of a mishpat is not that the Rav should say, yeah, okay, I'm going to give it to you. Nicht das gesagt. The idea of a mishpat is with tam, with seichel, to think what's right, what's wrong. So it's all a matter of understanding and saying that the proper thing to do in this case is this. So edus and mishpatim are both ideas of seichel, of understanding. Chukim, this is what the king said. It's a law. That's it. End of story. There's nothing to discuss. So it's l'mayla mitam. So the difference, I was getting back to the maimer. The difference between edus, chukim, and mishpatim are differences not in the actual way that you perform the mitzvah begashmis. You do the mitzvahs begashmis the same exact if it's edus, chukim, or mishpatim. What's the difference in the kavanah that a person has when he performs the mitzvah? When it's a chayik, says kavanah is that the Eibishter said to do a mitzvah, so therefore I'm doing a mitzvah. We're going to get more into it in the Maimon, I believe. When it's edus and mishpatim, he has the particular kavanahs of the mitzvahs. So what's b'hasheila ma'edus yalam shachash al dei ma'aseh mitzvahs? But the question of the Ben Chacham is, how could the Maisa of the mitzvahs draw down the light of the Eibishter? So what does the Kavanah, what do these distinctions have to do with the Maisa HaMitzvahs? You understand? First he asks, if he doesn't understand a general idea in mitzvahs, how could mitzvahs draw down the Ein Sof and Atzmos? So then, why is he going into details? It's a general question about the general idea of mitzvahs. Then he says, especially that the distinctions between mitzvahs that he's pointing out are not distinctions in Maisa HaMitzvahs. They're distinctions in Kavanas HaMitzvahs. But he's not interested in Kavanas HaMitzvahs. His whole point is that Kavanas HaMitzvahs don't matter. That the main thing is the Maisa. So why is he pointing out distinctions between the Kavanah of this mitzvah or the other mitzvah? What does it have to do with the topic that we're discussing? It has nothing to do with the Kavanah. It's all a question about the Maisa HaMitzvahs. We also have to understand that the son, the wise son, has a question when they get to all three types of mitzvahs. However, when we answer him about we only mention chukim when we answer. So he wants to know what's the edus, the chukim, and mishpatim. And we tell him, I'll tell you what the chukim is. Why don't we tell him also what the edus and the mishpatim are? We also have to understand over here is where it starts getting a little edel, I believe. Okay, so let's go a little slower and we'll try to pay attention. The difference between the three types of mitzvahs of edus, chukim, and mishpatim is mishpatim, mishpatim are mitzvahs that rational thought, healthy rational thought, requires us to do it. For example, gazel, gneva, kibbud aveim, not to steal forcefully. What's the word for it in English? I don't know. But not to steal, armed robbery, yeah. And then gneva is theft, where you steal when the person doesn't see. And kibbud aveim, that one should respect his father and his mother. These are all mitzvahs that can rationally be justified. The eidos, and what's the idea of eidos? Hema mitzvahs, shem eis v'zikarim. Eidos are mitzvahs that are a sign for us and a remembrance. For example, Shabbos. Shabbos is Oisi Deni of Menachem. I believe if I'm quoting the pasuk correctly, so it's a sign that the Eibishter created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day, on the day of Shabbos, he rested. So it's Saya sign and Saya remembrance, that we should remember that this happened, that it shouldn't be forgotten. Pesach, Sukkah, Utfilin, these are all mitzvahs that in one way or another are a sign for a certain, in other words, they indicate a certain idea, a certain concept that rational thought wouldn't necessarily arrive at and understand on its own. But this concept exists. And by doing these mitzvahs, we point out and we show that these concepts exist, that these are ideas that the Eibishter told us. And once the Eibishter told us about them, so now we understand the idea of Shabbos, that 6 days he created the world and the seventh day he rested. Pesach, they took us out of Mitzrayim. Sukkot, because the Eibishter surrounded us with the clouds. And Tefillin is the idea to remember the oneness of Hashem and the unity of the Eibishter and the whole world. So these are all ideas where Glat Seichel on its own wouldn't arrive at this conclusion. But once the Eibishter told it to us, we can understand it. And that's why we do it, to show that we understood this thing that the Eibishter said, and we want to show it in the world. It's a ace, and that's where we're performing it in this world. The mitzvah would not say that you have to do it to delay. Unlike the mishpatim, even if the Torah Chas Shalom was not given. We would learn to behave modestly from a cat which has modesty, and to not steal from ants, which they don't steal from one another, the crumbs that they carry around from place to place. Nevertheless, when it comes to the idea of Eidos, even though initially human understanding couldn't realize it, recognize it, however, after the Torah commanded us to do it, so the Seichel agrees that this makes sense to do. In other words, I didn't know that the Eibishter created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Once the Eibishter reveals this to me in his Torah, so I say, okay, it makes sense that as a sign and as a remembrance for the fact that the Eibishter rested on the seventh day, I should also rest on the seventh day. Makes sense now that you tell it to me. The chukim, then you have the category of chukim, which there are mitzvahs that even after the Torah commanded us to not do it, there's no room, there's no place in the mind that can understand it, that can rationalize it. Like shatnez, for example, that you shouldn't wear wool and linen together. There's no rationalization. Why shouldn't you wear linen and wool together? There's no reason. I think it's in this matter that we'll get into details if there is a reason, but it's higher than our understanding. I got some it's in Zeis Chukas Hatera that we just had in the Parshas Parah. For now, let's just start by saying that there's no reason. Okay, there's no reason for these mitzvahs. At least as far as understand the seichel is concerned, there's no reason for that. It's only because the Eibishter said, that's why I have to do it. The Eibishter said not to wear shatnez, so I don't have a choice. I can't wear shatnez. Not sure what that means over here. It says there's two levels. For example, if somebody goes to the doctor and the doctor tells him, do this or don't do that. Yeah. We're talking about Pesach. Let's bring an example from Pesach. First let's finish with an example from the doctor. Yeah. He says, do this, don't. Does the person understand why he should do this or not do that? If that doesn't take this medicine, does he understand why he should take this medicine? No. So why is he doing it? Because the doctor told me to do it. I have to do it. Right? But he knows that the doctor knows why. He doesn't understand. He's not doing it because the doctor sat down, put him through 3 months of medical school. He should understand the exact mechanism of how antibiotics, kill bacteria in the body. Now I understand what you're saying, doctor, so I'm going to take the antibiotic. It's not the way it works. The doctor tells you, here, I have a pill, right? It's the best news. If somebody goes to the doctor, he feels like he's dying. And now he's going to have to change his life. If he's lucky to live a little longer, his life is never going to be the same. He's not going to be able to do anything. What does somebody who goes like that to the doctor? He just wants to hear, I have a pill. I have a pill. Everything is going to be good. Right? So, I don't want to understand. The doctor's problem. He has to understand. So that's one level in a chukkah, where the doctor says take something. I don't understand it. But there is a reason. I know there's a reason. Just I don't understand. I have to do it because the doctor has a reason somewhere. That's not the emes ha'inin of a choik. A choik is not pshat that I don't understand, but I know that the Eibishter has a reason. That a chayk is saying I'm doing it because there is no reason. I'm doing it only and exclusively because Hashem said. Not because there's some reason, not because Hashem has a reason.
Faith. It's based on faith.
Yeah, but that's not the question. Isn't if I have faith in Hashem or not. So I have faith in Hashem. But why am I doing this? I'm doing this certainly because the Eibishter has a reason for it. So I'm happy to do it. I'm too small to understand it. The Eibishter is big. He has good reasons. So I'm happy to do it. That's not the true level of a chayk, because then you're doing it because you think that you ought to be doing it. The idea of a chayk is there's no reason. It makes no sense whatsoever. So I'm not sure when he says over here,
it's based on trust.
No.
Okay.
No, trust is the same thing. You trust the doctor that he knows what he's talking about. The question isn't, do I believe that the doctor is a good doctor? That's not the question. Okay? The question is, why? The doctor told me to do it, so why am I doing it? Because the doctor has a reason. When Hashem tells you to do something, why are you doing it? Because Hashem has a reason, because Hashem said. That's it. There's no reason. The only reason is Hashem said. It makes no sense. It makes no sense that first I should fast Erev Purim, and then on Purim I should go and have Purim. It's strange. It makes no sense to me. It's not a chukah, but to me it feels like a chayk. I don't know what to tell you. It makes no sense. Okay? But the Eibishter said to do it. I'm doing it not because it makes sense. What does make sense mean? Make sense means that I agree at some level that it's a good thing. That's what makes sense means. Yeah. So when I say it makes sense to the Eibishter, so I agree that in the Eibishter's world it's a good thing. So I'm doing it because I agree that it's a good thing. That's not the idea of a chayk. A chayk, you're doing it because the Eibishter said to do it. End of story. This whole conversation can only be had after you have full faith and trust in the Eibishter. So I'm saying it's not the question. After you have full faith and trust in the Eibishter, then the question is, why do you do what he says? Do you do what he says because you can appreciate somewhere that it's a good thing, or are you doing it because he said? And the ultimate level of a chayk is you're doing it because he said, not because you have any appreciation that there's something good in this. Because if you do, then it's about your own appreciation. It's not about what the Eibishter said. So I'm not sure what he means over here when he says chukah chakakti gzeira gezalti. Okay, according to this, we have to say l'chure mishpatim edus v'chukim. So l'chure, the ben chacham who has a problem that he doesn't understand the idea of mitzvahs, he should have asked. The order in which he asked the question should have been mishpatim edus and chukim b'seder d'milamata l'mayla, oy chukim edus and mishpatim b'seder d'milamayla l'mata, or go the other way around. But in any event, go in the order in which they are, how close to seichel and how far from seichel they are. However, the order in the pasuk is neither of them. It's in no particular order, apparently, in no apparent order. It's edus, then chukim. Then we go back to the opposite extreme to mishpatim. Okay. So what were the questions of Beis? The questions of Beis were that l'chura, even if you wanted to say what are the mitzvahs after the Ovis, he shouldn't have said Eschem, he should have said Eisanu. Eisanu will include him, but still exclude the Ovis. Okay. The second thing is, if he doesn't understand how mitzvahs can draw down the Ein and Sof, then what's the difference? What kind of a mitzvah it is? Why is he saying the kind of edus, the kind of chukim, the kind of mishpatim? His question is more the general idea of mitzvahs. How can a physical act draw down the Shekhinah? So why is he bothering to describe the three different types of mitzvahs? And then the answer, especially since the difference between the three different types of mitzvahs are only in the kavanah of the mitzvahs. When it comes to the ma'aseh, about which he's asking about the ma'aseh, there's no difference between etz chukim and mishpatim. So what's it negeya over here? What's his negeya? And then the Rebbe asks about the order of the mitzvah of the pasuk. That the order of the pasuk l'chura it seems to be arbitrary. Why? Because there's an order in these three types of mitzvahs, and the Rebbe introduces it not only to explain the question, but the Rebbe is going to get very much into edus chukim and mishpatim and the hemshech of the maimer. So the order of edus chukim and mishpatim is how close they are to seichel and how far they are from seichel. The closest being mishpatim, that they're so seichel that the human mind can come up with it on its own or learn it from nature. Edus is a little further from seichel. That's why the human mind can't come up with it on its own. But once you explain it to the human mind and tell it things that it didn't know before, now the human mind can understand it and agree that this makes sense. And chukim are things that are completely removed from the human mind. There's no reason. As far as the human mind is concerned, there's no reason. We're not going to get into the details if there's taka no reason or if there is a reason. I'm not sure what he's referring to here, but b'chlos, we'll just say there's no reason as far as the human mind is concerned. So that's the furthest removed from seichel. So now the order is either mishpatim, edus, chukim, if you want to start from how close it is to the human mind to how far it is, or chukim, edus, mishpatim, going from the highest to the lowest. But the order in the pasuk is edus, edus, chukim, and mishpatim. He's jumping around. Okay. And this Maimer that we point out has a special connection to us living over here in America. We're doing the Aveda of America because this is the first Maimer of Pesach. The first Pesach Maimer that the Fidik Rebbe said when he came to reside permanently in America, in the United States. So when we get to the question of the Ben Chacham, that it said that why does the Ben Chacham use the word eschem? In this one detail, he's similar to the Ben Rasha. That's the question of the Fidik Rebbe. So in other words, not getting into the fact that he says a lekenu later, but the Fidik Rebbe is saying, l'chura, how does the Ben Chacham and the Ben Rasha, how do they have a commonality? How do they have share something in common that they both use the word eschem? L'chura, this shows that there's a certain place where they touch, where they have something to do with each other. Notwithstanding the fact that the Ben Chacham includes himself in the Yidden, and he accepts upon himself that you have to do what the Eibishter says. This is benegeh to the Iker. It says in Order 23 that this is the lashon of the Maimer, le'ikr. Let's read a few more lines, and we'll see if we can come back to try to see if we understand what the Fidik Rebbe means with the Iker. 23. It says Kenu alashon ba'Maimer. It doesn't explain exactly. Yeah, it doesn't explain exactly what the Iker means. Let's read a few lines, and hopefully we'll be able to pull apart some sort of an understanding of what that means. But when it comes to the details of the mitzvahs, so over there he already excludes himself. He says eschem. Now, this is all we're going to have. If I had to teach, I would teach like this, that benegeh le'ikr means the general faith and belief in the Eibishter. Benegeh to the fact that he believes that there is an Eibishter. Okay, this he believes. In Hilchos Avodah Zarah that we had in Rambam last week, probably it was, the Rambam describes there's minim and apikasim and kaifim. So he says there's different levels. So you can have somebody who believes in the Eibishter, but doesn't believe that the Torah came from the Eibishter. Or you could even have somebody who believes in the Eibishter and believes that the Torah came from the Eibishter. I skipped a few levels, right? That the Eibishter doesn't communicate with people. Whatever it is, so there's an Iker. The Iker is that you believe in the Eibishter. But when it comes to the details, there you the Ben Chacham already could start having kfira thoughts, chas v'shalom, or at least thoughts where he starts questioning things that he shouldn't be questioning, right? The Rambam says that the ikid is to believe not only that there's an Eibishter, but that the Eibishter is menaves bnei ha'adam, that he communicates with people. The Eibishter reveals himself to people and tells them what to do. Without that, there's no foundation for the Torah, and that the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu is true. So, but the Iker, you could define it maybe either in believing that, but he doesn't believe in Pirusha and Teresh Baal Peh, whatever it is. However, and it could be that different Ben Chacham, there's different levels in the Ben Chacham. The one Ben Chacham, he agrees in this Iker, the other Ben Chacham agrees to more of the Iker, to less of the Iker. But the Iker is basically that there's the Eibishter and there's this Torah. But then when it starts coming to the details of Eidos Chukim HaMishpatim, over here he's already mamish like the Rasha. He's the same Eschem. I said, Isanu, I believe that there's an Eibishter. In the Iker, I'm okay. I'm not like the Ben Rasha. But when it comes to the details of Eidos Chukim HaMishpatim, over there, I'm Eschem. I'm just like the Rasha who says Eschem. That's what the Fidik Rebbe says over there. It's not only that we have to understand Pashat, how to make sense of the word. How does it fit in the in the situation that's being described? But rather, it's also a question that by him saying Eschem, it's mashma that he only accepts the Iker, and over here I should have read a little more, that the Iker is Kabbalah's oil. Okay, so to Kabbalah's oil, the Ben Chacham is okay with, but you're going to start talking to me about Kavanas HaMitzvahs, that's what's mashma in this line over here, that the Iker is Kabbalah's oil. The Ben Chacham understands that you have to listen to what the Eibishter said, but you're going to start talking to me about the greatness of the mitzvahs and the beauty that's in the mitzvahs and the high levels of the mitzvahs. Over there, he's already like the Ben Rasha. He's not interested. He's not interested. It's an interesting type of a problem. Yeah, Kabbalah Salah, I have no problem. I could identify with such an individual. You know, he says, "I'll do what you say and leave me alone." Yeah, it's like
much of Kabbalah soul. It depends the amount of Kabbalah soul.
Very good. It depends also what does Kabbalah soul mean to you. Right? You're saying that ultimately Kabbalah soul means everything. If you're picking and choosing, then what kind of Kabbalah soul is it? Yeah. But this is very good. But this Ben Chacham is more like somebody who says like this. Somebody who says like this. It's like I can't make a good story up about this right now. I'm saying, well, it's like imagine a nudnik, yeah, and he comes to you and he asks you something, and he says, I need $3 for a token to the train. Yeah, the guy is standing there since last week. He went right across the street into his basement to go to sleep, and every day he's standing by the token to get back home. He needs $3. Yeah, so he's a nudnik. But the guy's a Rahmana, so you give him $3. He's a yid, yeah. Let's not be judgmental. Yeah, I'll give him the $3. Let him have. I'll give him $1. I'll give him $3. Then you give him the $3. So now he wants to take also 5 minutes of your time, and he wants you to understand how good it is that you gave him the $3 and how important it is and how amazing you are. So you tell him, look, close me up. I gave you the $3. Now let me go. Yeah. So it sounds like this Ben Chacham is a little bit like that guy. Yeah, he's saying, I'll do what you say, but don't tell me that I also have to be happy that I'm doing it. It's so great. I have no choice. I'm doing it because I have Kabbalah soul. That's the Iker. And now leave me alone. Don't insist that I should also be happy that I'm doing it. You be happy that I'm doing it. I have to be happy that I'm doing it. You should be happy that I'm doing it in the first place. It looks like this is a pretty bad situation. It's not quite the Ben Chacham. And that's the Fidik Rebbe's question, L'chure. Vasara Ben Chacham is thus, who when it comes to Kabbalah's oil, he behaves like the Chacham. But when it comes to Edus Chukim and Mishpatim, he mamish acts like the biggest Eisver. He says, leave me alone, don't bother me with this. It's a pretty low thing. Not a Chacham for sure. Okay. Why is that a hektim to the Rebbe's Via Shleimer? I don't know. But let's just see if we can say again that the Frierdiker Rebbe says that with Eschem, the Ben Chacham is putting himself into the same category as the Ben Rasha, right? And don't confuse yourself. We know already from before that he's Machnis Atzmi Elaklau. He says Elikenu. But the point is, he seems to be in certain aspects, he seems to be on the same level of the Ben Rasha. That's why they're using the same word. And he adds that if anything, it seems like the Eschem is taking away from the Elikenu. He's qualifying the Elikenu. When I'll say Elikenu only about Kabbalah's oil. But about everything else, I'm not going to say Elikenu. But everything else, I'm going to say Eschem, just like the Rasha. Okay? So that's the idea that Rebbe brings from the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer. And then, with that hektim, we have a Via Shleimer. Okay, let's see if it's clear to us. If not, I'll try to go over it before next year, and we'll see if I can explain it. Okay, now it starts getting interesting. So before it started getting interesting with Eidus Chukim and Mishpatim, but now it starts getting interesting. In mitzvahs, there are two ideas. I'm doing Tiddle Daled in mitzvahs, there are two ideas. The first part is Zesh HaMitzvahs Tzivui Hashem. The Indian Zel B'chol HaMitzvahs B'Shabbat. This, that the mitzvahs are the commandment of the Eibishter. And this is true to the same degree and the same extent with in all mitzvahs. And then you have a second idea in the mitzvahs. And then there's the second dimension to a mitzvah, that there are different categories, different types, different levels in mitzvahs. Okay, so famous thing Chassidus says, that's why we say on all brachas we say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvaysav. Right? Before every mitzvah, no matter which mitzvah it is that we're doing, the first thing that we say is Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvaysav. It's a tzivui Hashem. Why am I going to do this now? Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvaysav. And then for each particular mitzvah, we change the nusach. This mitzvah is tefillin. It's not tzitzis. That's a different mitzvah. Leishiv v'sukkah is a different mitzvah. So there's two parts to the mitzvah. There's one part in which all the mitzvahs are the same, and that's why for all of them we say Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvaysav. It's the Eibishter's mitzvah. That's why the Eibishter said to do it. That's why I'm doing it. And then there's a second part of the mitzvah where we say, oh, this mitzvah has this idea, that mitzvah has that idea. There's different mitzvahs. There's a difference between the mitzvahs. They're not all the same. Tefillin, tzitzis, each one of them get a different ending to the bracha because it's not the same. It's different b'feish. So then there's the three types of mitzvahs in general in which the mitzvahs differ, which are Eidos Chukim and Mishpat. My knowledge, we're not going to make the difference between all of the mitzvahs. We're going to put them into three categories, into three buckets. These two differences are also found in the way you perform the mitzvah. Not only in the mitzvah itself, but also in the way you perform the mitzvah, there's a difference. When a person has a kavanah in mitzvahs, there's two kavanas that the person has to have. There has to be a kavanah klalis, l'kaim tzivui Hashem. The kavanah is hu b'chol mitzvahs b'shav. In every single mitzvah, a person must have in mind that I'm going to do now what the Eibishter says. The kavanah pratis, and then comes the specific, the particular kavanah, the particular intention. Reish Tazayin, you have it?
Yeah.
The particular intention that you have to have in the mitzvah. Kiyum mitzvah mipnei shehi edus. I'm doing this mitzvah because it's an edus, or remember, it's a kanon l'ma'aseh b'reishis. Oy mipnei shehi chuko gzeira. Oy mipnei shemechiyeves kam mitzad seichel. Or I'm doing it because this mitzvah is also required, that seichel requires that I do it. Okay, so saying the mitzvahs themselves, that they're all equal in this, that what is a mitzvah, that it's a tzivui Hashem, but then you have differences between individual mitzvahs, and saying the way that you do the mitzvah, you have to have different kavanas, that there's one kavanah that you have to have in all the mitzvahs equally, that I'm going to perform, to do what the Eibishter said, and then you have to have individual kavanas depending on the mitzvah that you're doing. Since all of the mitzvahs are a commandment of the Eibishter, why is it negeya? Why do we care what the category of the mitzvah is? The Ben Chacham tells you, I don't understand. He's telling you, so now the Ben Chacham is actually not such a malicious character. He actually makes a lot of sense, and I wouldn't have a good answer for him. He wasn't saying, don't bother me with the Eidos Chukim and Mishpatim. He's telling me, you're not making any sense. He's saying you're not making any sense. You're not coherent. You're not consistent, self-consistent in your statement. You're saying that I have to do the mitzvahs. Why? Because the Eibishter said to do them. If I have to do the mitzvahs because the Eibishter said to do them, then why? And not only why, but how can you demand that I care about the particulars of the mitzvah? Doesn't that run contrary to the idea that I'm doing it because the Eibishter said? So the Ben Chacham is asking, what do you want from me?
It's taking away from tzivus Hashem.
Look, it's taking away from tzivus Hashem. What do you want from me? You're telling me do it because the Eibishter said, and then you tell me, no, do it because it makes sense, because it's beautiful, or do it because it doesn't make sense, but do it because of something. What do you want from me? That's the question of the Ben Chacham. It's a good question. It's a good question. It's not only a question of how can you expect me to do both. It's a question of one takes away from the other, so make up your mind. What is it? And that's why we had the Akdama of the Frierdiker Rebbe, where he made this distinction between the Iker, which is the Kabbalah's oil, which is just the performance of the mitzvah, and then the higher ideas, the goodness of the mitzvah, the Eidos Chukim Mishpatim, because that's exactly, that gives the Rebbe the idea, so to say, in the V'yesh Leimar, that there are two inyanim in the mitzvahs, and the Ben Chacham is asking, how do these two inyanim, the Iker, which is that it's tzivui Hashem, and the details of Eidos Chukim Mishpatim, how can they both go together? ולכן מדייק בהמיימר דגם לאחר שם אלוהינו יש מקום לתספינגל לפרטים ענם די דסקוקים ומשפטים ומצי חס ושלום מסעצו מן הכלל וכדי לשלול אותו זו הווה ללמד. And that's why in the Maimon is medayik that since he doesn't understand that when it comes to the pratinyanim of Eidus Chukim HaMishpatim, he completely doesn't get it to the degree where you could think Chas V'Shalom that he's not part of Klal Yisrael. And that's why you need to, affirm and say, no, don't make the mistake. He is part of Klal Yisrael because he so doesn't understand this idea of Eidus Chukim HaMishpatim. He can't get it. He doesn't know what to do with it. It's such a distant concept for him. Because it's supposed to do, because the Eibishter said that he could almost think that he's separating himself from other Yidden. That's why he has to say, no, I'm not. I'm saying Elokeinu, don't make that mistake. Chas v'shalom. Okay, so we're going to leave with this question. That you have to have the two inyanim. I think that's the question. That you have to have the two inyanim in the mitzvahs, that because you're doing it, because the Eibishter said, and then you also have to have the reasons for the mitzvahs. Eidus Chukim u'Mishpatim, how do they both go together? And that's the question of the Ben Chacham. Okay, shkech. Yeah, look, you have the Sefer, you have the